Nearly 7,000 years before the Great Pyramids rose in Egypt, a mystery was already waiting beneath the soil of Turkey. Scientists say that Göbekli, the world's oldest known temple, was built around 9500 BC, long before Stonehenge or any of the monuments we know today. This site has left researchers terrified because it does not fit into our history books. How could humans, still thought to be wandering hunter-gatherers, build something so massive and so advanced? Deep beneath a mound, once called Potbelly Hill, huge stone pillars were hidden, arranged in circles and carved with animals. For decades, no one noticed. The site was passed over, dismissed, even forgotten. But when excavations began, the truth became clear. This was not just another ancient ruin. Göbekli was older than farming, older than writing, older than cities themselves. It forces us to ask hard questions. Did temples come before farming? Did faith, not food, push humans to work together and build civilizations? The more we learn, the stranger it becomes. Who built it? Why bury it? And what does it mean for the story of human beginnings? Göbekli is proof that history is not as simple as we once believed. It shows us that, before the pyramids, humanity had already created something powerful, something that still shakes the foundations of our past. The Hill of Secrets on a windswept plateau in southeastern Turkey, a mound once called Potbelly Hill, seemed ordinary to anyone passing by. To locals it was just another rise in the land, but hidden beneath its surface lay a secret so ancient and unsettling that it would one day shake the very story of human history. This mound was Göbekli. When archaeologists finally began to dig, they realized they were not uncovering simple ruins. They were standing at the edge of rewriting civilization's beginnings. The story of its discovery began by chance. In 1963, a survey team from Istanbul University and the University of Chicago noticed broken limestone and flint tools scattered on the surface. They assumed it was only a Byzantine cemetery. For decades, the site was forgotten. But the hill was guarding its mystery, waiting for the right moment to be revealed. Beneath the soil, massive stone pillars, carved with animals and symbols, stood in circles like guardians of a lost world. The deeper archaeologists dug, the clearer it became. This was no ordinary site. It was monumental architecture built in a time when humans were not supposed to build monuments. Göbekli was a hill of secrets, and every stone pulled from the earth whispered of a story older, stranger, and far more complex than anyone expected. First clues in 1963. The first real clue to Göbekli's hidden secret came in 1963. A joint team from Istanbul University and the University of Chicago was surveying the region. On the surface of the mound, they found fragments of flint tools and broken limestone. To them, it looked unremarkable. The team assumed the area was simply a Byzantine cemetery and moved on. No one guessed they were standing on top of the world's oldest temple. For decades, the site was left untouched, the mystery waiting quietly under the soil. The oversight shows how fragile history can be. Sometimes the greatest discoveries are dismissed as ordinary. Imagine standing there, unaware that beneath your feet lay stone pillars older than the pyramids and carved symbols that could rewrite the story of human beginnings. If those surveyors had dug just a little deeper, history might have been rewritten decades earlier. Instead, Göbekli remained forgotten until chance brought new eyes to it. This early mistake reminds us how easy it is to overlook the extraordinary, especially when it hides beneath something that appears common. The first clues were there all along, but it would take another generation to realize the truth. The mound was no cemetery. It was a doorway to humanity's lost past. A shepherd's discovery, the mystery of Göbekli might have stayed hidden forever if not for a chance discovery by a Kurdish shepherd in the early 1990s. While tending his flock near Potbelly Hill, Savak Yildiz noticed strange stones jutting out of the soil. These were not natural rocks. They were tall, flat, and some bore strange carvings. Curious, he pointed them out to local authorities. At first, no one thought much of it. To them, it was just another pile of weathered stones scattered across the Turkish countryside. But Yildiz had unknowingly stumbled upon something that would rewrite human history. His quiet act of noticing what others ignored opened the door to one of archaeology's most important discoveries. Soon, word of the stones reached archaeologists, including a German researcher named Klaus Schmidt. When Schmidt arrived, he immediately recognized their importance. What the shepherd had seen was not random rock. It was the tip of a buried monument, one that was thousands of years older than Stonehenge. In that moment, a simple shepherd helped reveal the world's oldest known temple. His discovery reminds us that history often depends not on kings or scholars, but on ordinary people who take notice of the unusual and decide to speak up. Klaus Schmidt arrives in 1994. German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt visited the hill after hearing about the strange stones found there. Unlike earlier teams, he instantly knew this was no ordinary site. Schmidt had already studied other Neolithic settlements, but what he saw at Göbekli Tepe stunned him. Massive limestone pillars, some weighing 20 tons, were arranged in deliberate circles. Their surfaces carried carvings of foxes, snakes, vultures, and lions, images alive with motion and meaning. Standing there, Schmidt later said it felt like stepping into the 0 point in time, as if he had uncovered the very beginning of human civilization. He realized that these stones were older than any temple or monument known. Excavations began in 1995 under his direction, and year by year, the hill revealed more of its secrets. What amazed Schmidt most was not only the size of the pillars, but the fact they had been built at least 6,000 years before the pyramids, long before farming or cities existed. To him, Göbekli Tepe was not just a temple. It was evidence that religion, gathering, and shared vision came before agriculture. Klaus Schmidt's arrival marked the turning point. What the world had overlooked for decades, he recognized as the first great monument of humanity. Circles of stone. When excavations at Göbekli Tepe began, the first shapes to emerge from the soil were vast circles of towering stone pillars. Each pillar was carved into a T shape, some reaching over 16 feet tall and weighing up to 20 tons. Arranged in rings, the stones stood like silent guardians from another age. At the center of each enclosure, two taller pillars faced one another, as if locked in eternal dialogue. The sheer scale of these structures stunned archaeologists. How could people more than 11,000 years ago, long before metal tools, the wheel, or domesticated animals, carve and move such massive stones? The effort required planning, leadership, and cooperation on a level no one thought possible for hunter-gatherers. These circles were not homes or shelters. There were no hearths or signs of daily life. They were built for gathering, ritual, and meaning. The carvings of wild animals, foxes, snakes, vultures, boars, seemed alive, carrying symbols we still struggle to understand. Each circle was more than architecture. It was a statement of unity, belief, and purpose. These circles of stone made clear that Göbekli Tepe was not just a settlement, but a sacred place. Monumental proof that humanity's first great achievements were spiritual as much as physical. Carvings of animals. The most striking feature of Göbekli Tepe's pillars is not their size, but their carvings. Each stone is alive with images of animals, foxes, boars, vultures, lions, snakes, and scorpions etched in relief. Some appear frozen mid-motion, as if caught in a hunt. Others seem symbolic, watching over the site like guardians. These were not simple decorations. The carvings spoke of a shared language, a system of meaning that united the people who built them. For hunter-gatherers, animals were central to life, sources of food, danger, and power. To carve them on stone pillars meant they carried deeper importance, perhaps as spiritual symbols or clan emblems. Some figures even look human-like, blending man and beast, hinting at gods or ancestors. Archaeologists still debate their meaning. Were they mythological stories, seasonal markers, a code we no longer understand? The sheer variety shows that whoever built Göbekli Tepe was not primitive. They had imagination, shared traditions, and beliefs strong enough to shape stone into symbols. These carvings remind us that long before writing, humans recorded their ideas in images. Each animal cut into limestone was a message across time, and though its full meaning is lost, its power still stirs awe today. Older than Stonehenge, the dating of Göbekli Tepe shocked the world. Radiocarbon tests revealed that the site was built around 9500 BC, more than 11,000 years ago. That makes it at least 6,000 years older than Stonehenge and nearly 7,000 years older than the Great Pyramid of Giza. Before this discovery, most experts believed that large monuments could only be built by farming societies with permanent homes, stable food supplies, and organized leadership. Yet Göbekli Tepe shattered that idea. It proved that long before agriculture, humans were already capable of extraordinary achievements. This temple was not the work of simple nomads. It was the creation of people who had vision, belief, and the ability to cooperate on a massive scale. The comparison to Stonehenge is striking. Where Stonehenge was raised by farming communities, Göbekli Tepe was carved by hunter-gatherers who supposedly lacked the means for such work. Its existence forces us to rethink the timeline of civilization. Maybe it wasn't farming that came first. Maybe it was faith, ritual, and the desire to gather that pushed humans to organize and, eventually, to farm. Göbekli Tepe stands as proof that our ancestors were far more advanced, far earlier, than history ever told us. A world without farms. What makes Göbekli Tepe so mysterious is when it was built. At a time before farms, before pottery, before writing, and before cities. Around 9500 BC, humans were still thought to be small bands of hunter-gatherers, moving with the seasons, surviving on wild plants and animals. According to traditional history, such groups should not have been able to build monuments. They had no wheat fields to provide food, no domesticated animals to carry loads, and no villages to anchor them. Yet here stood massive stone circles, carefully carved and arranged, requiring hundreds of workers to plan and cooperate. This flips the story of civilization on its head. Instead of farming leading to temples, Göbekli Tepe suggests the opposite, that the need for ritual, worship, and gathering may have driven people to settle down and invent farming to support such efforts. Religion, not agriculture, might have been the spark that created civilization. In a world without farms, people still found purpose, still dreamed of building something greater than themselves. Göbekli Tepe is a reminder that human imagination came before human tools, and that belief may have been the first foundation of society. The puzzle of labor, one of the greatest mysteries of Göbekli Tepe, is how it was built. The limestone pillars weigh 10 to 20 tons each, yet the people who carved and raised them had no metal tools, no wheels, and no animals to pull heavy loads. Archaeologists estimate that hundreds of people would have been needed to cut the stones from quarries, drag them across the plateau, and set them upright. But where did these workers come from? At that time, humans lived in small groups of 30 to 50. How could they gather enough manpower without permanent settlements? Some experts suggest seasonal gatherings, where scattered bands came together once or twice a year for rituals and building. Others believe a larger community may have existed nearby, still buried under the soil. Whatever the case, the level of planning is undeniable. To carve the pillars, transport them, and arrange them in perfect circles required leadership, organization, and shared purpose. This was not the work of chance. It was a project that demanded vision. The puzzle of labor at Göbekli Tepe forces us to admit that our ancestors were not primitive wanderers. They were builders, planners, and dreamers capable of uniting for something far greater than survival. Faith before farming. Göbekli Tepe challenges one of the oldest ideas in archaeology, that farming came first, then villages, then temples. Instead, the site suggests the opposite. People may have built temples first, and farming followed to sustain the gatherings. Klaus Schmidt believed that Göbekli Tepe was a sanctuary where groups of hunter-gatherers came together seasonally to worship, feast, and share knowledge. The effort to construct such massive enclosures would have required food, resources, and planning beyond what roaming bands could provide. This may have pushed people to experiment with cultivating grains and domesticating animals. In other words, faith created the need for farming, not the other way around. The carvings of animals, the towering pillars, and the deliberate design all show that belief and ritual were powerful enough to unite scattered groups and inspire monumental building. This flips our understanding of human progress. Spiritual purpose, not survival needs, may have been the spark that turned humans from nomads into settlers. Göbekli Tepe reveals that before the first wheat fields, before pottery and writing, people already had something even stronger: the drive to worship, to connect, and to leave behind symbols in stone. Why was it buried? Perhaps the strangest mystery of Göbekli Tepe is not how it was built, but why it was buried. Around 8000 BC, after centuries of use, the stone circles were deliberately filled with rubble and sealed beneath the hill. This was not natural collapse or erosion. It was intentional. Entire enclosures were backfilled with soil, broken stones, and debris, as if the builders wanted to hide their work forever. But why would people spend generations constructing monuments only to cover them up? Some archaeologists believe it was ritual, a way to close a chapter in their culture. Others suggest it was done to preserve the site, protecting it for the future. There is also the darker possibility that something fearful or sacred happened there, and the builders wanted it hidden. Whatever the reason, the burial turned Göbekli Tepe into a time capsule, untouched for thousands of years until its rediscovery. This act of concealment deepens the mystery, raising unsettling questions about what the builders knew, and why they wanted their temple hidden from sight. It is as if they wanted us to find it only millennia later, forcing us to confront a story of humanity we were never meant to forget. Only 10% revealed. Despite decades of excavation, archaeologists estimate that only about 5 to 10% of Göbekli Tepe has been uncovered. Beneath the soil, dozens of enclosures remain hidden, still sealed after more than 10,000 years. What lies buried could change everything we think we know about this site and about humanity's past. The exposed pillars already show extraordinary skill, with carvings, alignments, and massive stones arranged in precise circles. But the majority of the site has never been touched. Researchers work slowly, balancing curiosity with conservation. The stone is fragile, and exposure to air and weather risks damaging the carvings that have survived millennia underground. This means the full story of Göbekli Tepe may not be known for generations. What secrets are waiting beneath the hill? More carvings, new enclosures, evidence of settlements or rituals we have not imagined. For now, we can only guess. Each excavation season brings new surprises, hinting at a complexity even greater than we realize. The thought that 90% of the site is still hidden makes Göbekli Tepe one of the most important and mysterious places on Earth. A library of stone that has barely opened its first page. The hunter-gatherer paradox. Göbekli Tepe presents archaeologists with a puzzle that defies logic. By all traditional accounts, hunter-gatherers 12,000 years ago lived in small bands, moving with the seasons, surviving on wild plants and animals. They were not supposed to organize large-scale projects or build massive monuments. Yet the towering T-shaped pillars of Göbekli Tepe prove otherwise. Each stone weighs up to 20 tons, carved with animals and symbols that required not only skill, but also planning and cooperation. How could small, scattered groups manage this level of work without farming, without permanent villages, and without writing? This is the paradox. Nomads created permanence. Hunter-gatherers built temples. Some researchers believe seasonal gatherings explain it. Many groups uniting once or twice a year to build and worship before dispersing again. Others suggest the beginnings of farming were already underway, sparked by the needs of the temple itself. Whatever the truth, Göbekli Tepe forces us to admit that our ancestors were far more capable than we imagined. The paradox remains unsolved, but it challenges the very timeline of history. It shows that civilization may not have started with crops and villages, but with vision, belief, and the will to carve meaning into stone. A birthplace of symbols, the carvings at Göbekli Tepe are more than art. They may be humanity's first true symbolic system. The pillars are covered with foxes, vultures, snakes, boars, and abstract shapes that seem to tell stories. Some scholars believe these images were not random decorations, but part of a shared language, a code understood by the people who built the site. If true, this makes Göbekli Tepe one of the earliest places where humans used symbols to communicate complex ideas. Long before writing, people here were carving meaning into stone, creating a visual language that bound their community together. The animals may have represented clans, seasons, or myths passed down through generations. Some researchers suggest the carvings acted like memory aids, allowing oral traditions to survive across centuries. Others see them as spiritual emblems, marking the site as sacred ground. Whatever their purpose, the symbols show that early humans were already capable of abstract thought, storytelling, and collective belief. Göbekli Tepe may not only be the world's first temple, but also the birthplace of symbols, the point where humanity began to record its ideas in a form that could outlast the people who made them. Tools of early farming. As excavations at Göbekli Tepe continued, archaeologists began finding more than pillars and carvings. Scattered around the site were grinding stones, mortars, and flint blades, tools used to process grains. This discovery shocked researchers. Göbekli Tepe dates to a time before farming was supposed to exist, yet here were signs that people were experimenting with cereals. Some believe the gatherings at the site may have driven the first steps toward agriculture. Feeding hundreds of workers and worshippers required more than hunting alone. Perhaps people began harvesting wild grains, grinding them into flour, and storing food to support large seasonal rituals. If so, Göbekli Tepe may have been both a temple and a laboratory for farming, where faith and survival came together. The pillars suggest ritual, but the tools suggest daily needs, showing that life here was more complex than once thought. Instead of religion and farming developing separately, Göbekli Tepe hints that they were linked. That belief created the need for food security, and farming followed. These early tools may be small, but they carry a massive idea. The world's first temple may also have sparked humanity's first fields. Skulls and rituals. Among the most unsettling discoveries at Göbekli Tepe were human skull fragments. Some bore signs of deliberate cutting and shaping, suggesting they were not simply remains but part of ritual practices. Archaeologists believe this may point to a skull cult, a tradition seen in other Neolithic sites where ancestors, or perhaps enemies, were honored or displayed. The presence of these modified skulls adds a darker dimension to the site. It suggests that Göbekli Tepe was not only a place of gathering and worship, but also of intense ritual centered on life, death, and memory. Were these skulls trophies of conflict, offerings to the gods, or symbols of lineage and power? The answer remains unclear, but their existence changes how we view the site. It was not just a serene sanctuary. It may have been a stage for rituals that bound communities together through awe, fear, and reverence. Combined with evidence of feasting and animal sacrifices, the skulls hint at ceremonies that were both sacred and unsettling. Göbekli Tepe was more than stone circles. It was a place where belief, ritual, and the mystery of death shaped the earliest chapters of human civilization. A shift in theories. When Klaus Schmidt first studied Göbekli Tepe, he saw it as the world's first temple, a sanctuary built only for ritual, never for daily life. His idea captured headlines and shaped global understanding of the site. But as more evidence emerged, that neat picture began to change. archaeologists uncovered grinding stones, storage pits, and signs of water systems nearby. These discoveries suggested that Göbekli Tepe was not just a ceremonial center, but part of a wider community. Perhaps people lived close to the site, farming, storing food, and supporting the massive gatherings that took place there. Some experts now argue that Göbekli Tepe was a multifunctional hub, a blend of ritual trade, social life, and even early agriculture. The interpretation of its carvings also shifted. What once seemed purely symbolic may encode seasonal cycles, clan identities, or even the beginnings of a proto-writing system. After Schmidt's death in 2014, Turkish archaeologists emphasized this broader view, seeing the site not only as sacred but also practical. This shift in theories shows how Göbekli Tepe resists easy explanations. Each new discovery forces us to rethink, proving the site is more complex than one simple label could ever describe. Burial of the temples around 8000 BC. After centuries of use, the people of Göbekli Tepe did something extraordinary. They buried their own monuments. The great stone circles, some standing for generations, were carefully filled with rubble, soil, and broken tools. This was not collapse or abandonment. It was intentional, methodical, and massive in scale. Why would a culture spend centuries carving pillars, raising temples, and gathering in ritual, only to cover it all? Archaeologists are divided. Some believe it was a ceremonial act, a way of closing an era or sealing the sacred. Others think it may have been protection, preserving the site for the future. A few even suggest fear. Perhaps something changed, and the people wanted the temple hidden forever. Whatever the reason, the burial preserved Göbekli Tepe as a time capsule, waiting for rediscovery thousands of years later. The act itself may be as mysterious as the carvings and circles. It shows intention, organization, and meaning beyond survival. The burial of the temples adds another layer of intrigue, suggesting that the people of Göbekli Tepe were not only builders, but also storytellers, deciding what should remain visible and what should be hidden in the earth until a distant future. Enter artificial intelligence. For decades, Göbekli Tepe was studied with traditional tools, trowels, brushes, and careful excavation. But in recent years, technology has transformed how researchers explore the site. High-resolution 3D scans, satellite imagery, and digital reconstructions allowed scientists to see patterns invisible to the human eye. Then came artificial intelligence. Algorithms trained to detect shapes, ratios, and alignments began analyzing thousands of images and measurements from the site. What AI revealed unsettled even seasoned archaeologists. It flagged recurring mathematical ratios in the layouts of the enclosures, patterns that suggested deliberate geometry rather than random design.